Welcome to Justice in Two Languages.
Hey everyone, welcome back to an all-new episode of Justice in Two Languages with Attorney David Elias Idinopulos out there in New Mexico. He's the founder of Elias Law in Albuquerque. I am your host, Mike Leon. David is a bilingual Spanish-speaking attorney. He spent decades helping New Mexicans navigate the chaos that follows a serious accident, from protecting their rights to understanding what really matters in those first few hours and days after a crash. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about what to do after a car accident in the state of New Mexico and how those early decisions can shape everything that comes next. David, it's good to see you as always. I want to start here at this high level because a crash happens in New Mexico, right? People are usually scared. They're confused, a little dazed. They're trying to figure out what happened. What do you want them to take away from this in terms of focusing on those first few minutes and what they should do?
Sure. And Mike, thank you so much for having me back. I can't believe you guys are having me back, but somebody apparently is interested in what I have to say, so I'm here to say it. So after an accident, there are a few things that you need to do to protect your rights. Obviously, you got to make sure that you're okay, pull over to the side of the road. I mean, all the sort of the common sense things that you need to do, particularly if you're on a highway or you're on a major street. If you can get your vehicles off the road, it's better for everyone. And I say that just as a general tip. You want to exchange information with the driver. You don't want to admit fault. You don't want to say what you were doing. I would not tell somebody what you were doing immediately after the accident until you sort of have had time to think clearly about the accident. Once you've exchanged information, called the police. At that point, in terms of getting treatment, that's a little bit up to you. Although I will tell you that people that get into an ambulance and go to an emergency room do get more money out of insurance companies. And the simple reason is, and nobody likes to hear this, but the more your bills are, the more the insurance company has something to do or something to deal with if the case goes to trial. So getting into an ambulance and going to an emergency room will raise the expense. And for that reason, it does increase the value of your case. But, it's all common sense things. Exchange information, driver's license numbers, all that sort of thing. Call the police, wait for the police to show up. And then if you decide to go to an emergency room, the value of your case will go up.
David, what about photos, grabbing license plates? I think a lot of people don't know that there are other details that they tend to leave the scene and they don't take down these details. So what matters most before you leave the scene?
Absolutely. Get as many photos of the other person's vehicle as you possibly can. I cannot tell you the number of times where we had clients who get out of their vehicles, start talking to somebody, they go back to their car, they turn around and the other vehicle is taken off. So more than anything, get a photo of the person's license plate, because once they flee the scene of an accident, if you have their license plate, now they've committed an act which is a misdemeanor in most jurisdictions, including obviously the state of New Mexico. You can track them down, provide that information to the police. Very clearly, you want to take photos of the damages so that they can't claim damage later on that wasn't caused in that accident. But again, anything that you can do to record the conditions that existed at the moment of impact, the better off you are.
David, a lot of times, and you mentioned about why you should call the police. I would love for you to harp a little bit more about that, because a lot of times families, maybe they hesitate in Albuquerque to call the police right after a crash. What's the value of having that police report? How does it help later on, especially when the claim's still being evaluated?
Many times the value of calling a police is that you are the person calling the police, which suggests a certain level of innocence. For example, we'll get cases where we filed a lawsuit against somebody who attempted not to report this accident at all, but our client was the one who reported that to the police. And so insurance companies sort of take a look at that and say, well, if the client of Elias Law called the police and our client tried to convince them not to call the police, maybe something is going on. Maybe that indicates a certain level of culpability on our client and a certain level of innocence on the part of Elias Law. This is Albuquerque, and Albuquerque is an under-resourced city. And in fact, a lot of New Mexico is under-resourced as well. So the mere fact that you called the police and tried to preserve evidence sort of looks good. It looks like it's in your favor, as opposed to sort of dealing with it on your own. And a lot of times when you deal with it on your own, that the person you're involved in the accident with may tell you, oh yeah, I caused the accident. Well, you put this case into the hands of their insurance company, all of a sudden the story changes. So if you got a 911 call saying, hey man, I was just driving down the road, this dude pulled out of nowhere, T-boned me, et cetera, now that 911 call is recorded.
It's a great point. And you mentioned a moment ago about heading to the ER or urgent care after a crash. What's important about the treatment you receive there in and of itself? Not maybe not the bills and the insurance yet, just the medical side.
Obviously, you want to make sure that you're not dead, dying, or bleeding. And that's what I tell everybody an insurance, or rather emergency room is good for, to make sure that you're not dead, you're not dying, you're not bleeding. But the other thing is this. If you don't record your symptoms, your complaints in a medical record, it is as if it never happened. The number of times in the last 30 years that I've represented clients who didn't report a complaint, didn't say that they were sore, didn't say that they were having trouble walking, and then push comes to shove, we're in litigation, and they say, "Oh yeah, I've been having difficulty raising my arm over my head." The insurance company will say, "Well, if it was really caused in the accident, wouldn't you have reported it to an emergency room? Wouldn't you have reported it within days of the accident? The fact that you're bringing it up now because you were a tough guy, we're going to hold that against you."
David, let's talk about everyone's best friend, the insurance companies. And I say that facetiously because they usually reach out quickly. From what you've seen in your experience, what are some of the early conversations that catch people off guard when they get a call from the insurance company?
I think people expect to be called by an insurance company. That's sort of just normal stuff, right? But what really catches people off guard is how friendly insurance companies are initially trying to get information and trying to get you to give them a statement, which will somehow tip the balance in favor of the insurance company. So you may get a very friendly person on the phone saying, "Oh my gosh, we're so sorry to hear about your accident. Tell us how the accident happened. Here, hang on, let me take a recording." And then before you know it, you are giving a statement that you have never prepared for, you've never discussed with an attorney, and sometimes, many times, that statement will be used later on to sort of ratchet down the value of your case. I'll give you an example, right? You contact the insurance company, calls you, and they say, "Well, what color was the color of the car next to you?" And you say, "I don't know, I wasn't paying attention." The insurance company said, "Oh my gosh, not paying attention." Well, that's failure to keep a proper lookout. And so the value of your case is now 20% less. How fast were you going? Well, I don't know how fast I was going. Oh, you don't know how fast you were going? Well, obviously everybody knows how fast they were going. They were going within the speed limit, but they're not looking at their speedometer every second of every drive that they take. The more doubt you express in a statement, the more the insurance company has to work with. And so before we're going to allow anybody to give a statement to an insurance company, and really most of the time we don't, because what we need is contained in the police report. Many times the cause of the accident is obvious. But if we have to allow somebody to give a recorded statement to an insurance company, we make sure that we know exactly what they are going to say before they say it to the insurance company.
David, in a previous episode, we've talked about how big New Mexico is and the windy roads, and you've got a mix of locals, you've got tourists, truckers, all these people driving long distances in between towns. You yourself as well as mentioned that on previous episodes. How does that variety kind of show up in the types of cases you see?
In sort of more populated cities like Albuquerque, you're obviously going to get more fender benders, more crashes in the 35 mile per hour speed, 45 mile per hour, some 50 mile per hour, et cetera, et cetera. But there's just a lot more going on. And so, you're going to get kind of smaller cases, and we take them, right? Smaller cases where somebody says, "Yeah, I got hit, I'm sore, I need a chiropractor, maybe I need some physical therapy, my shoulder is sore, maybe I need an MRI or something like that." Down south where you have a lot of industry, there's a lot of oil revenue comes from Eddy County, from Lee County, et cetera, you get a lot of really, really awful collisions, a lot of really sad death cases, because you've got a lot of 18-wheelers, you've got a lot of water trucks that are associated with the oil industry, you've got a lot of tanker trucks driving around, a lot of gravel and sand trucks driving around, and a lot of those roads down there are 2-lane roads, And industry never stops. So those trucks are going 24/7. They're going at, the speed limit in some of these places is 70 and 75 miles per hour. But if they don't have to stop or slow down, they won't. And so you see really horrendous accidents in the southern part of New Mexico, somewhat different than you would see within, say, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, those kinds of cities.
David, a moment ago, we were talking about what to do in the immediate aftermath of a crash, right? Can you share a situation and give both opposites, right? Like where someone's actions in that first day or two of the crash made the case stronger, and then one where maybe it made it more challenging.
Sure, sure. Going back to what we talked about before, when somebody is involved in a bad accident, like you look at the damage to the vehicles and you can tell, oh, this was a real crash. Going to an emergency room and immediately recording the complaints of pain that you are having helps tremendously. So, pretty much within a day to a week of an accident, you will notice symptoms. And it just doesn't pay to be tough. So somebody says, yeah, I'm having some tightness in my shoulder. It really is hurting. The doctors will say, okay, we're not going to get an MRI just yet, but we're going to keep an eye on it. So that a month after the accident, you get an MRI. The MRI reveals a torn rotator cuff. The insurance company really can't impeach that evidence because from the beginning, from the time that you went in an ambulance to the emergency room, you were saying, I got some tightness and shortness in my shoulder. The corollary, the opposite of that, is you're a tough guy. Right. And tough guys don't complain about anything. Yeah. They go to the emergency room and, how are your shoulders? Yeah, they're pretty good. Well, pretty good is not how they should be. They should be fine. Right. So you wait 6 months to complain about pain in your shoulder because you think it's going to go away. And finally, it doesn't go away. You get an MRI. The MRI reveals a torn rotator cuff. Well, now the insurance company can say you went X number of months without complaining about this pain in your shoulder. And now you want a jury, and therefore us, the insurance company, to believe that you sustained this rotator cuff tear in the accident. If you really had sustained it in the accident, wouldn't you have complained a lot sooner? And I can tell you, as somebody who has had a torn rotator cuff, which requires surgery, it starts as sort of nagging pain, a little tightness in your shoulder. And if you don't pay attention to that and complain and associate that with the accident, months down the road, you'll have a major injury on your hands, but you won't have documented it. You will have given to the insurance company a defense on a silver platter.
David, as we wrap on this episode, in the days after a crash right now, what have you seen that has helped people stay organized as everything around them starts moving all at once?
The biggest thing is to call an attorney, and it doesn't have to be me. Obviously, I want you to call me, right? But an attorney can take care of a lot of the sort of navigation that you have to do immediately after an accident. Most decent attorneys, us included, we will handle your property damage. We will send out letters of representation to the insurance company so that the insurance company is not constantly bothering you. We will make arrangements to get a rental vehicle. That can be tricky at times if you do not have collision coverage on your policy and you get a rental vehicle. Many times people assume that the insurance for the rental vehicle is going to be covered by the at-fault party. That is not the case, but a good attorney can cut through a lot of that red tape and basically sort of give you breathing room to recover, to go get therapy and treatment. Maybe you got a job that you got to get back to and you just don't have time to handle a bunch of phone calls with an insurance company. So, one reason that people like me get hired is because people say, look, I could do this on my own, but I might leave money on the table. I might have questions about whether or not I handled it correctly. But more than that, why would I handle something that I don't know how to handle and take my time to do that if I can just give that to an attorney?
Yeah. David, thank you for the time, the insights, the discussion on this topic. As always, I truly appreciate it, my friend.
My pleasure. Thank you. And if anybody out there needs help, by all means, give us a call.
And you can give him a call in just a second. I'm going to tell you how. But that's it for today's episode of Justice in Two Languages. If you want to connect with David, you want to learn more about the team over at Elias Law, do me a favor right now. Visit abogadoelias.com. You're going to find the resources in English y en español to help you understand your rights and feel supported as you move forward. Thank you for everybody out there listening to this episode. But before you go, do me a favor, like, subscribe, leave a review and comment, or share the episode with someone who needs to hear it. As always, I'm Mike Leon. See everybody next time.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.